Good evening, everybody. My name is Colin Barr. I am the director of the Keough-Naughton Institute for Irish Studies here at Notre Dame and professor of modern Irish history here. And it is my great privilege to welcome you to our first Ambassador Jim Kelly Diplomacy Lecture, which will be delivered tonight by the Honorable Geraldine Byrne Nason, Ambassador of Ireland to the United States. Ambassador Byrne Nason, thank you again for joining us here at Notre Dame. Second visit in my time. I'm not sure if it's your second visit overall. Outrageous. But I'm glad you now have two with me here, so we'll assume that means you like it and we'll keep coming back. But it's really great to see you again and joining us here, and we're looking forward to your lecture. I also want to extend a warm welcome to Notre Dame to a few other guests we have. To Ambassador Byrne Nason's left is the Honorable Claire Cronin, former ambassador of the U.S. to Ireland. So we have wonderful symmetry here, who will join Ambassador Byrne Nason on the stage. Already, we don't have a stage, on elevated chairs for a brief conversation after the lecture, which I'm very much looking forward to. We have also Brian Callahan, Consul General of Ireland for the Midwest, a great friend of Notre Dame, a frequent flyer here in South Bend. We're going to get you that T-shirt we promised you. I'm waiting for coming in with the Fighting Irish, no ties. You're going to have to get the T-shirt. Brian, it's great to see you again. Kevin Murray, Honorary Consul General Designate of Ireland in Indianapolis. Maybe not your first visit to Notre Dame. I think your first visit to a Keough-Naughton event, certainly in my time. You're very, very welcome. Looking forward to you taking up your post to the south of us. And they've kindly journeyed both from Chicago and Indy to come tonight. And it's a real pleasure, most importantly of all, I think, to welcome Ambassador Jim Kelly's wife and daughters, Anne Martin, Orla Kelly, Kira Kelly, to Notre Dame. We're honored to have you with us tonight, and we're honored to have you here as we remember and celebrate Jim Kelly's exceptional work as a diplomat on behalf of Ireland. And thank you so much for making the time to come, and we're really pleased you can be here at this inaugural lecture, and we hope to see you again in future iterations of this lecture. Now, the Ambassador Jim Kelly Speaker Series, of which this is the first, is a collaboration between the Keough-Naughton Institute and the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to commemorate the legacy of Ambassador Kelly, who served as the Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations, and before that, as the Irish Ambassador to Canada. And as a Canadian, I say that's clearly the most important role. A little bit warmer here than Ottawa, still nice today. As President Michael D. Higgins noted, Ambassador Kelly was widely known, and I'm quoting here from the President, a man of great kindness and integrity, epitomizing the finest values of public service. It's in the spirit of recognizing Ambassador Kelly's outstanding diplomatic career that this Speaker Series is named in his memory and will bring in years to come members of the Diplomatic Corps of Ireland who have served in ambassadorial roles around the world. And there's no better start to that than the serving ambassador, of course, to the United States. We look forward to our continuing partnership with the DFA, or DFAT, on this series, which will advance our own collective work, Notre Dame and the Ministry, to support research and programming on Ireland's present and future on the global stage. So we're very pleased, delighted to have Ambassador Byrne Nason, a dear friend and colleague of Ambassador Jim Kelly, here this evening to deliver the inaugural lecture of this series. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Ambassador Byrne Nason, Ambassador Cronin, and then I will turn the stage over, I promise. Podium over. So, Ambassador Geraldine Byrne Nason assumed her role as Ireland's 19th ambassador to the United States in August 2022. Before this appointment, she served as ambassador and permanent representative of Ireland to the United Nations in New York, where she led Ireland's successful campaign for a seat on the United Nations Security Council and led the New York Security Council team for the 2021-2022 term. I believe actually last time you had joined us in Notre Dame, you told us the story of Ireland's successful campaign for a seat, which was fascinating. Now, during her long career, Ambassador Byrne Nason has served in Brussels, New York, Paris, Vienna, and Helsinki, probably some other places too. I noticed a sort of cold theme to those cities. You couldn't get Cape Town, Bogota. She was also the second Secretary General in the Department of the Taoiseach from 2011 to 2014, where she was the highest-ranking female public servant in Ireland at that time. Since taking up her role in Washington, Ambassador Byrne Nason has traveled across the United States, working with Ireland's 8 consuls general in deepening Ireland's relationships across the political, economic, and cultural spectrum here in the United States. Now, to the important parts. A native of County Louth, in 2020, Ambassador Byrne Nason was awarded the Freedom of Drogheda, the town's highest honor. In 2014, much less importantly, she was elected a member of the Royal Irish Academy, Small distinction by comparison. Even less important, an honorary Doctor of Laws from Maynooth, where we both have a connection we discovered today, as well as master's and bachelor's degrees in literature from St. Patrick's College, Maynooth. Now, I will also take this opportunity to introduce Ambassador Claire Cronin, who, as I said, will join Ambassador Byrne Nason in conversation after her lecture. A lecture, I should say, which will be about 30 minutes. Now, Ambassador Claire Cronin served as the U.S. Ambassador to Ireland under the Biden administration from 2022 to 2025. As ambassador, she advanced U.S. foreign policy in the region and strengthened economic ties between Ireland and the U.S., leading efforts to safeguard the economic stability secured by the Good Friday Belfast Agreement in the aftermath of Brexit. No easy task. She was awarded the Outstanding Contribution to U.S.-Ireland Partnership by Ireland INC for her work in this regard. Prior to her role as ambassador, Claire Cronin served as state representative of Massachusetts from 2013 to 2022, and made history as the first woman to serve as majority leader in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. And as chair of the Joint Committee on the Judiciary, she was the architect of the most comprehensive criminal justice reform law in decades. Now, as a consultant, Smith, Costello, and Crawford, Claire Cronin brings her decades of leadership experience and this strong record of bipartisan collaboration in federal and state government to her continuing work after her time in Dublin. Now, here's the most important part from my point of view. She is a graduate of Stonehill College, as maybe some other people up here in the front, and Suffolk University Law School, less interesting from my point of view. Admitted to the Massachusetts Bar, admitted to practice the U.S. District Court and U.S. Supreme Court, and I hope somebody we will see many, many times again here at Notre Dame. It's a real privilege, Claire, to welcome you here to Keough-Naughton and Notre Dame. And with that, I'd like to welcome Ambassador Geraldine Byrne Nason to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much indeed, Colin. A minor health warning, I may cough from time to time. It's the end of a non-infectious cough. I just want you all to be comfortable with that. But I wanted to say straight away how happy I am to be back here on what I think of as holy hallowed ground in Notre Dame. Really an institution that has such deep and extraordinary connections with the country I'm very proud to represent. It's an extraordinary honour to be here this evening to deliver the inaugural Ambassador Jim Kelly lecture here in Notre Dame. Jim Kelly was a dear friend, he was a consummate diplomat, and he was a patriot. I'm delighted, thrilled really, that I'm here this evening in the presence of Jim's beloved family, his wife Anne Martin, Ciara and Orla. I know that Jim's love and devotion to his family informed absolutely everything that Jim did. And I know that he is deeply missed and still loved every single day by his family. But I'll also say that his diplomatic family, right across the Irish Foreign Service, join me tonight here in Notre Dame in honouring the superb diplomat and friend that we knew in Jim Kelly. Jim and I, as Colin said, served together when I was Ireland's ambassador and permanent representative to the UN during Ireland's tenure as an elected member of the Security Council. Two ambassadors, Jim Kelly and Brian Flynn, served as deputy permanent representatives. I couldn't have had a stronger nor more committed team. Brian is currently our ambassador to the OSCE in Vienna and would love to have joined us here this evening. He was a friend and a huge admirer of Jim Kelly's, and he asked me to express his best wishes to the family here this evening. And I also wanted to recognise our Consul General, Brian Cahalan, who's with us from Chicago this evening. Brian, who knew Jim longer than me, was also a member of the Security Council team. So we're coming back in a sort of a family collegial way to remember Jim tonight. In some ways, I learned early on that Jim took a sort of circuitous route into diplomacy. He started his career as a revenue officer before moving to the private sector and eventually finding his way to the foreign ministry. But I've heard from the family that the roots of Jim's diplomacy were perhaps to be seen as early as 7 years old, which is quite impressive, when incentives were needed to get him to bed ahead of any election results. And his mother even took to putting coloured charts up at night in the morning so he wouldn't feel that he had missed any important political news at that stage. So there must have been some indications early on. I think when he came to the Foreign Ministry, he really found his true home, and he had postings subsequently in Copenhagen, Brussels, at an earlier time at the UN mission in New York, and that was before being appointed as a superb, outstanding representative to Canada. And it was from that role as ambassador in Canada that Jim joined the UN team in New York when we took our elected seat on the Security Council 2021-22. Throughout his life, and what was evident as he lived his life in New York, in the real world, Jim retained an absolute in-depth, I would say really passionate interest in US politics, and he was certainly someone who could forensically analyse the outcome of any election at national, federal or state level. So he was a particularly valuable colleague to get the first read on an election result from wherever he would happen to be. I believe election night was sacred in the Kelly household, no matter what the duty was. Jim's natural brilliance, his extraordinary collegiality and exceptional networking made him an outstanding diplomat, and I was so proud to have him as a colleague, and I always deeply appreciated his counsel and his support. I don't believe, honestly, that I ever had a piece of advice from Jim that I didn't follow. He had wisdom and he had perspective, and they are two qualities that make a good diplomat great. I'll admit, however, that I was a little wary of Jim when he was on the opposition quiz team. He had an absolutely encyclopedic knowledge in general, and particularly he knew sports and Irish Gaelic sports, football, hurling. He knew them like no one else. And truth is, everyone wanted to be on Jim's team. I've no doubt that he would absolutely have revelled in a home game here in Notre Dame and being able to shout louder than everybody else, "Go Irish." So, Jim, I hope you're listening tonight and that you join us in that reflection. Ar yesh dé go raibh hanam. May he be at God's right hand. It was in our work at the Security Council that I came to know the breadth of Jim's talent and his zest for what we call multilateral diplomacy. I always felt that Jim didn't just understand and have the knowledge around the complexity of the multilateral system, because complex it is, but he certainly had a true passion for what the UN and the broader international multilateral system represent. A way for nations to work together to build a better, stronger and a fairer world, no matter what size the nation is, nor what region the nation comes from. Jim shared my own belief that while the UN rose from the darkness of the most savage conflict in our history, it has only become more relevant with every passing year. 80 years ago, 80 million people were killed, including over 6 million who were murdered in a deliberate, monstrous, industrial-scale genocide which sought to obliterate Europe's Jewish population. Ethnic identity, sexual orientation and disability made others targets for murder. Cities were laid waste and civilians suffered unimaginable harm. Humanity quite literally descended into the abyss. The UN was the phoenix that rose from that darkness. I think it was the highest expression of our commitment to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security. I grew up with a father who was not a diplomat, but who kept Dag Hammarskjöld's markings on his bedside. So I always like to quote Dag, as though I knew Dag well, Dag Hammarskjöld, the UN Secretary General of the 1950s, where he captured the vision of the UN. He said the UN was not created to take mankind to heaven, but to save humanity from hell. And that's a mission that's as vital today as it was at that time. Since Ireland joined the UN in the 1950s, the UN has been the cornerstone of Irish foreign policy. For any Irish diplomat, serving at the UN is the highest honour. Being on a Security Council team is a double privilege, a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Jim Kelly spent a significant part of his career reinforcing the passion and belief in the UN. In total, I believe that Jim spent almost 8 years at the UN or in the UN system, and Irish diplomacy was absolutely the beneficiary of that. I think that Jim and I shared the conviction for the UN because we saw that for a country like Ireland, a rules-based international order is not a vague aspiration, but it's actually a vital necessity. Effective multilateralism, rooted in universal principles, protects us all, whether big or small. It's the guarantor of our sovereignty. In the UN today, there are 193 countries. 100 of those countries have populations of under 10 million people. We need the UN. We need an international rules-based order to flourish, to prosper. Jim Kelly understood that instinctively. He consistently found ways to deliver on that commitment. One of Ireland's longest-serving foreign ministers, Frank Aiken, also was a loud man, if I may say. He knew the price of conflict at home and recognised the value of multilateralism. He spent months, he used to leave the island of Ireland and base himself in Manhattan, championing the disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation agenda, a legacy that continues to drive us today. Frank spoke in the 1960s of the importance of a system of world government in which disputes between nations will be settled by law based on justice rather than force. I believe that today we are now faced again with an increasingly uncertain and fragmented world, one in which some countries wish to return to a world where might equals right. But if the history of the UN teaches us anything, it is that such a path can lead us to unspeakable tragedy. During our work together at the UN, Jim Kelly and Team Ireland on the Security Council worked in every way we could to avoid that drift. On the fateful night of the 24th of February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, I sat in the chair at the Security Council and Jim was alongside me. I think both of us had a long experience in diplomacy at that stage, but it was easily the most shocking moment we had ever experienced in our collective, as a team, our collective careers. What we witnessed that night was a full-scale illegal invasion in defiance of international law, in defiance of the UN Charter, frankly, in defiance of everything that we believed in as Irish diplomats. Sitting beneath the large mural that dominates the Security Council chamber and that symbolises the promise of future peace and individual freedom, Ireland delivered consistent, principled, and I would not hesitate to say, powerful criticism of Russia's war. We have equally defended the UN Charter and the people of Ukraine in the same passionate manner. As the days followed that invasion, Jim and the team continued to reinforce Ireland's clear, unequivocal message. In the course of our Security Council tenure, Jim's extraordinary skills and leadership were also to the fore in other critical initiatives that we undertook. Our negotiations on the renewal of the vital Syria humanitarian cross-border resolution meant navigating tricky political dynamics, not least, frankly, between the United States and the Russian Federation. And that mattered. Renewal allowed for life-saving humanitarian aid to continue to reach over 4 million Syrians in need and provided much-needed certainty to a range of humanitarian actors on the border into Syria. Looking back, and we take a longer view here, I see that humanitarian concerns were at the heart of much of Jim Kelly's work, and the values that guided him still guide us today. An unwavering commitment to justice, the rules-based international order, and a belief that all people are entitled to dignity, to their human rights, and to a future free from conflict. Jim and our Consul General I've mentioned earlier, Brian Cahalan, who's with us this evening, worked together and very hard on all our Middle East files on the Security Council, and there were many of those. Ireland has continued our active engagement on the humanitarian-driven Middle East policy throughout the recent crisis. This is why Ireland welcomes the ceasefire and the hostage release deal. This is a significant achievement, and we see it as the first step on the road to peace. We commend the efforts of the United States to secure and, importantly, to sustain this agreement. We certainly warmly welcome the release of 20 Israeli hostages after 2 long years in captivity. It's a moment of long-awaited hope for them and their families. We believe that absolutely every effort should be made to find and to release the bodies of all of the deceased hostages. We believe it's imperative that we preserve the ceasefire and now flood Gaza with desperately needed humanitarian aid. The people of Gaza have also endured unimaginable suffering. Ireland's foreign policy is rooted, deeply rooted in its values. And because of that, we speak up wherever those values are threatened. At one stage in his career, Jim worked on development issues. That was entirely in keeping with his belief that Irish diplomacy stands up for the vulnerable in the world. That's the right thing to do, but it's also who we are. From the indispensable role played by Irish Catholic relief organisations in Biafra in the late 1960s, to the €2.3 billion invested by the Government of Ireland just last year in the essential work of Irish aid, Irish people have long stood in solidarity with the most vulnerable and marginalised, and Jim's work on development policy reflected that. Both at the UN and in the world more broadly, we put those values at the heart of our foreign policy. And indeed, those values have been at the heart of the Irish state since its foundation. They've been at the heart of how Irish people have defined themselves long before then. They were certainly at the heart of everything Jim Kelly did as a consummate diplomat over a long career. In remembering Jim tonight, we are also launching the Ireland programme for America 250. Many of the values that I've just spoken about have their roots in this country. And I think it's worth taking a few minutes to reflect on the shared values that bind us. As we mark America 250 next year, worth thinking that the people of the United States lit the spark that marked the beginning of this extraordinary nation in a way that was founded on the ideals of liberty, democracy, and equality of opportunity. That message reverberated around the world. Those ideals have certainly inspired generations of Irish people who made the United States their home, and Irish America has in turn worked towards forming the more perfect union promised at the start of your Constitution. As Ambassador of Ireland, I'm always proud to represent a country and a people who I believe have made such an enduring contribution to building this great United States. It's for this reason that the milestone next year will be a special one for us in Ireland and for our diaspora here in the United States. We're engaging with the commemoration with a programme of events which will culminate in St. Patrick's Day next year, working alongside the partners of the America 250 Semi-Quincentennial Commission. That's really hard to say, Semi-Quincentennial Commission. Irish America 250, as well as academic and community organisations. And I'm delighted that tonight is, in a way, the jump start for that programme here. It couldn't be in a more appropriate place with the deep and strong Irish roots that go back right to your own foundation here in Notre Dame in 1842. It's a place, Notre Dame, that embodies the values that have guided Irish America over the last 250 years. A commitment to service, to community, to this country, and of course, that fighting Irish spirit, which has marked, I think, our contribution to the United States over time in many different ways. The contribution goes all the way back to before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It's estimated about 200,000 people left Ireland for the US in the 1700s. The majority of them were Ulster Presbyterians. Since then, Irish America has really been at the heart of shaping this nation, and many of those Irish were there at the beginning of this republic. At the signing of the Declaration of Independence, 3 of the 56 signatories of that document were actually born on the island of Ireland. Matthew Thornton of New Hampshire, James Smith and George Taylor of Pennsylvania. John Dunlop of County Tyrone produced the first printed copies of the Declaration on the night of the 4th of July in 1776. Irish people played a pivotal role in the Revolutionary War. Stephen Moylan, little-known Cork man, in 1737 became an aide to General George Washington. And on January the 2nd, 1776, the day after Washington had raised the first American flag, Moylan wrote a letter to the aide-de-camp saying that he referenced the United States of America, and historically we believe this to be the very first use of that term for this new nation. Commodore John Barry of Wexford won several key naval victories during the Revolutionary period and is now considered the founding father of the US Navy. And Lydia Dara, a Dublin-born nurse, famously used her proximity to the British Army headquarters in Philadelphia to gather intelligence for the Continental Army, reputedly warning troops of impending attacks in 1777. As ever, of course, history is nuanced and a little complicated. And while Irish people who had settled here fought for the revolution, true also many soldiers who fought against the Patriot cause were also Irish. We have a 24-year-old William Burke, born and raised in Ireland, who was part of the British 45th Regiment, who was actually sent, Clare, apologies, he was sent to Boston to punish the locals for the Tea Party. He went from there to New York, took part in the Battle of the White Plains, and ironically, this gentleman was a fluent Irish speaker, so he may actually have used our own language with his fellow soldiers, which was probably a useful code at the time. Of course, in subsequent years, people left Ireland for other reasons in increasing numbers. Many fleeing, Many who left Ireland were fleeing famine and persecution at home, but also came here in a determination to forge a brighter and better future for their children. And those who came, as a rule, worked hard. They helped to build the railroads that connected this country and later the skylines that define it. Others served their communities and their adopted home as firefighters, teachers, nurses, doctors, police, and soldiers. They channeled their commitment into building stronger communities and ultimately, I would like to think, a stronger nation. And when that nation was threatened in the Civil War, more than 100,000 Irish and Irish Americans joined the Union cause, with units like the Irish Brigade garnering a reputation that demonstrated their commitment to the freedoms promised by the US Constitution. Throughout the 19th century, the dream of freedom for Ireland was kept alive here in the great United States. Those who sought independence for Ireland over 3 centuries, the 18th, 19th, and into the 20th century, looked to the ideals of life, liberty, and equality of opportunity that were expressed so eloquently in your Declaration of Independence. Just last month, we moved to a new embassy on Pennsylvania Avenue, right next door to the White House. In the lobby of our embassy, the US Declaration of Independence takes pride of place directly across from our own proclamation, which reminds us of the deep and enduring bonds between our two nations, almost reflecting each other at the level of nation and value. Indeed, the entire story of Irish diplomacy began here in the United States. Over 101 years ago, the US received the credentials of the Irish Free State's first ever representative, Timothy Smitty. And so by that act, the United States became the very first country in the world to formally recognize the newly independent Irish state. Poetic but politically absolutely critical move by the United States. We are deeply connected, of course, not through our politics, but also our people and our values. And today, here in the United States, 31.5 million people identify as Irish American. When that first Irish diplomatic delegation came to work in Washington, their first concern was to find visas for Irish immigrants. Simply weren't enough jobs in the nation state at the time to support all of its people. Those who travelled came here with their values and their culture, as well as hope for better futures. And as they grew more established in their communities, they ran for elected office. Ireland is fortunate today to have the bounty of that gathering of Irish political interest in the early 20th century. We have good friends at all levels of government. Ambassador Cronin, as a state legislator, is a supreme example of that. At state level, in Congress, on Capitol Hill, and in the White House, across the aisle, across this country. And in recent years, we've come to understand that Ireland's diaspora in the United States has been and is broader and deeper than we might traditionally have thought. And that's a richness that we are now learning how to explore and cherish, celebrate even. It's a challenge to recognise that there are as many different ways of being Irish American as there are of being Irish. It's estimated about 30% of African Americans have Irish heritage. And while some have long celebrated the heritage, some are now just discovering their roots. I recognise that's a complex and challenging part of our history. Some of that comes from dark places, but it's certainly a darkness we want to acknowledge and address as we welcome a new affinity with Ireland, which is very important to us. It was also true that in the 20th century, the civil rights movement here in the United States inspired John Hume, one of the architects, not just of the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland, but of the entire peace process in Northern Ireland. And the role that the United States played and continues to play in the peace process remains for me the outstanding achievement of our relationship. The United States has been steadfast in its commitment to protecting and building on peace in Northern Ireland. The bipartisan engagement by successive US administrations and Congresses and the support of the diaspora here in the US for peace in Ireland have been absolutely indispensable. Indeed, I always say we would not have peace on the island of Ireland if it were not for the support of the United States and which led to the Good Friday Agreement. Over a quarter of a century later, I'm delighted to say that the US continues to play a critical role in ensuring peace and economic progress on the island of Ireland. I'm almost coming to an end here. Today, Ireland and the United States share one of the world's most dynamic economic relationships. It's a partnership, of course, built on the historic ties I've just described, our shared values, and a spirit of innovation that connects communities and businesses across the Atlantic. It's a relationship that's a two-way street today. It's a relationship that creates jobs, drives that innovation, and builds opportunity on both sides of the Atlantic. Irish people can now be found in almost every industry and community across the United States. Men and women every morning get up and go to jobs here in the United States in Irish-owned companies, Irish-funded jobs. Those companies play a key role in the US economy, operating in every sector, every state. Perhaps little-known fact is that Ireland is today the fifth source of foreign direct investment, the fifth largest source of foreign direct investment into the United States. Irish companies' investment here is worth over $390 billion. Irish businesses have become part of the fabric of American life, and I would hope that the employment offered to at least 200,000 people across this country brings skills, entrepreneurship, and a global outlook to local economies. And of course, we hugely value the US and its trading relationship, its investment relationship in Ireland. American companies are trusted partners in Europe and a place where global businesses can thrive, innovate, and connect in Ireland and into Europe and other international markets from a safe base in Ireland. Today, Ireland hosts a vibrant ecosystem of US companies that create high-quality jobs, support local communities and drive growth in key sectors, and that has helped to transform Ireland from that small, impoverished island I spoke about earlier on the edge of Europe. We weren't geostrategically particularly well placed to now become one of the world's most successful economies. It was a nation whose people left that island in search of opportunity, and it's now somewhere where others are coming to build better lives for their families. And for this, we thank you here in the United States. And I know that while there are many opportunities at home on the island of Ireland, and we certainly don't emigrate in the same numbers that we once did, many, many Irish people still dream of experiencing life here in the United States and as making that part of their own career structure as they move forward. I'll leave you with the challenge, if I may, which is that I think there is an onus on those of us who have benefited from the opportunity to move freely between the US and Ireland, that we advocate for continued opportunities for the next generation of young Irish people to come and experience the United States, and in doing so to enrich the pool of Irishness that is at the heart of our great relationship. The United States and Ireland have been steadfast friends for centuries, and for centuries America has been a place of welcome and opportunity for Irish people. Our nation's green has been threaded through the rich tapestry of the United States by those who came before us. That will continue, we hope, well into the future for another 250 years. We have a shared history inspired by the founding ideals of your great country, a present defined by a determination to make our shared futures better, a future, I hope, that will be defined by a friendship that grows stronger and more prosperous. We can continue to work together as a force for good, a force that will see a world continue to grow, founded on rules based on the international order and rooted in the universal principles. I come back to where I started, remembering our colleague, our friend, Jim Kelly. I believe that's what Jim worked for throughout his professional life, and I'm deeply honoured tonight to remember that friend, consummate diplomat, husband, father, and patriot, Ambassador Jim Kelly. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.